Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to another lesson. In this lesson, we are going to learn about IELTS Speaking Part 1. The topic of our lesson is films. Films. In this lesson, we are going to look at some questions that you may get during your IELTS speaking test on films. I'm also going to give you the sample answers to all the questions. At the end of this lesson, I'm also going to give you some really useful tips to ensure that you pass your IELTS speaking test with a very high band. Now, before we begin the lesson, have you subscribed to the channel? If you haven't, then please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up if you find it useful. Now let's get into our lesson. The first question is, do you like to watch films? Do you like to watch films? In this question, the examiner simply wants to know whether you enjoy watching movies. Movies and films means exactly the same. So to answer this question, you can say, yes, I must say that I derive a lot of pleasure from watching films. I find them really entertaining, even more so when I watch them with my family or friends. Yes, I must say that I derive a lot of pleasure from watching films. I find them really entertaining, even more so when I watch them with my family or friends. So in that answer, I have confirmed to the examiner that yes, I do like to watch films. After that, I have provided some extra details about it. I say that I derive a lot of pleasure. To derive a lot of pleasure, it simply means I enjoy watching films. I derive a lot of pleasure from watching films. I enjoy watching films. So the phrase I derive a lot of pleasure from is an expression that is going to give you a higher band than when you say I enjoy watching films. I derive a lot of pleasure from watching films. I enjoy watching films. After that, I explained why I like films, okay? And that is because I find them really entertaining. Even more so, okay? Even more so means that particularly, okay? Particularly when I watch them with my family or friends. Yes, I enjoy watching films, but when I watch the films with my family or friends, I find them extra entertaining, okay? So, even more so means particularly, especially, okay? So I could also have said, I find them really entertaining, especially when I watch them with my family or friends. I find them really entertaining, especially or particularly or even more so. Even more so would be a higher band, okay, than saying, for example, especially. So, let's move on to question 2. Do you prefer local or foreign films? Do you prefer local or foreign films? In that question, the examiner simply wants to know your opinion as to whether do you enjoy watching local films from your own country or you prefer to watch foreign films from other countries. Now you can answer that question by saying, I like a mixture of both, depending on my mood and who I'm watching the film with. When I'm alone or with my friends, we tend to watch foreign films, mainly in English. But if I'm watching a film with my family, we often opt for local films based on our culture. I like a mixture of both, depending on my mood and who I'm watching the film with. When I'm alone or with my friends, we tend to watch foreign films, mainly in English, but if I'm watching a film with my family, we often opt for local films based on our culture. So in that answer, I have clarified to the examiner that I like a mixture of both. That means that I like local, but I also like foreign films. Remember that expression, I like a mixture of both. But I've also pointed out that it depends on my mood and it depends on who I'm watching the film with. When I'm alone or when I'm with my friends, we tend to watch foreign films, mainly in English. But if I'm watching a film with my family, we often opt for. To opt for is to choose. Okay? Remember the first expression I use, a mixture of both, depending on my mood and who I'm watching the film with. Then the next expression that you need to remember if you want to get a high band is we often opt for. I opt for means I choose. Okay? We tend to watch. We often opt for local films based on our culture. Based on our culture. Remember the prepositions. Okay? Now, let's move on to the next question, and that is question 3. What genre of films is your favorite? What genre of films is your favorite? What is your favorite genre when it comes to films? What type? Genre means category or type. What type of films do you like? What categories of films do you like? So the examiner wants to know your favorite. So you have to choose one. Now you can answer that question by saying, my favorite genre has to be comedy films because I can laugh my head off. I find horror films too scary, and in my opinion, sci-fi movies too fictitious and dull. My favorite genre has to be comedy films because I can laugh my head off. I find horror films too scary, and in my opinion, sci-fi movies too fictitious and dull. So in that answer, I have pointed out to the examiner that my favorite genre is comedy films. Okay? My favorite genre has to be comedy films. And then after that, I explained why. And the reason is because I can laugh my head off. Now, this is an English expression. I can laugh my head off. It means that you can laugh really hard. Okay? If I say, for example, oh, I watched that film and I laughed my head off. Laughed my head off. To laugh your head off, it means that you laughed so much. But I also provided some extra details. So I choose, my favorite genre is comedy films. I find horror films. Remember, that's another genre of films. Horror films. I find them too scary. And in my opinion, sci-fi movies are too fictitious and dull. Remember, we have more categories. But if you want to just remember a few, remember these 3 genres of films: comedy films, horror films, sci-fi movies, but you also have romantic comedy, okay, or romantic films. So for the sake of your test, you can just remember comedy films, horror films, sci-fi films, romantic films, okay? Now, Let's move on to question 4. How often do you go to the cinema to watch a movie? How often do you go to the cinema to watch a movie? In this question, the examiner wants to know how many times do you go once a week? Do you go once in 2 weeks? Do you go twice a month? Do you go once a month? 3 months? How often? Now, you can answer this question by saying, quite frankly, I rarely go to the movies. I prefer to watch films on TV or from a DVD. It is cheaper, convenient to watch at home, and equally entertaining. Quite frankly, I rarely go to the movies. I prefer to watch films on TV or from a DVD. It is cheaper, convenient to watch at home, and equally entertaining. So I have made my choice here. How often? I have made it very clear to the examiner that, quite frankly, I rarely. It means that I seldom go to the movies. You hardly go there. Okay? I hardly go to the movies. Instead, I prefer to watch films on TV or from a DVD because it is much cheaper, it is convenient to watch at home, and it is equally entertaining. Okay, so those are my reasons as to why I rarely go to the movies. Quite frankly, I can't remember the last time I went to the movies because I just prefer to watch films at home on television or from a DVD. In my opinion, it is much cheaper. It is more convenient to watch at home. I don't have to travel and I don't have to worry about the weather, and it is equally entertaining. It is, in my opinion, just as entertaining as if I watch the film from the cinema. But obviously everyone is different. Maybe you enjoy watching your film at the cinema. Now, let's move on to question 5. What was the first film that you watched? What was the first film that you watched? Now, the examiner wants to know what is the name of the very first film that you ever watched? What is the name of it? What is it called? Now, you can answer this question by saying, if my memory serves me right, okay, that should be, if my memory serves me right, it was Titanic, a film about the 1912 sinking of the RMS Titanic, starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. If my memory serves me right, so in that sentence, remember to remove the letter I. It should be, if my memory serves me right, it was Titanic, a film about the 1912 sinking of the RMS Titanic, starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. So in that answer, I have made it very clear to the examiner that I am not very sure, and to express that, I used an expression that we use a lot in English, if my memory serves me right, okay? That is another way of saying, if I remember correctly, it was Titanic, okay? And then you need to explain just a little bit, just a few lines about the film. And it is a film about the 1912 sinking of the RMS Titanic. And then I explained who stars in the film, and that is Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. Now, this brings me to the next section of our lesson, where I'm going to give you some few tips to ensure that you pass your IELTS speaking test with a very high band. Tip number 1, ensure that you understand the question. Underline the keywords for example, for your speaking part 2 and part 3. For part 1, listen very carefully to the examiner so that you understand the question. And if you don't understand the question, you can ask the examiner to explain. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, The next thing is try as much as possible and have at least 3 to 4 points, 3 to 4 ideas for each question. Join your ideas together using linking words, okay? Do not simply say yes or no. Do you like to watch films? Yes. And then after that, I explained a little bit more about it. The next tip, when you're giving your answers, use a variety of sentence structures. Use simple, compound, and complex sentences. A simple sentence has one verb. A compound sentence has 2 verbs. And a complex sentence has 3 verbs. Now, once you have done that, the next thing that you need to try and do is use the correct vocabulary and expressions when you are giving your answers. In my sample answers, I have underlined for you a lot of phrases that you may copy, okay, and use in your own speaking test that will get you a very high band. They include the following. I derive a lot of pleasure from watching films. I find them really entertaining. Remember the expression, even more so. I like a mixture of both, depending on my mood and who I'm watching the film with. We tend to watch foreign films. We often opt for local films based on our culture. I can laugh my head off. Horror films, scary, sci-fi movies, fictitious, dull. Quite frankly, I prefer to watch. It is cheaper, convenient to watch at home and equally entertaining. If my memory serves me right, okay, starring, all these expressions are going to give you a high band, 8, 9. As soon as you use some of these expressions, automatically your band starts going up. If my memory serves me right, I can laugh my head off. A mixture of both. I derive a lot of pleasure, and so on. All these words, I have underlined them for you. Try and use them and adapt them in your own answers. The next tip is, once you have got your ideas for each question, then just join them together using linking words, okay? Use a variety of linking words. I have used some linking words in my answers, okay, such as even more so, all right, and, okay, and there are a few more, okay? So use your linking words, but do not just use linking words for the sake of it. You need to use linking words correctly and in the correct context as well, okay? Now, this brings me to the next tip. Try as much as possible and use intonation when you're speaking, which means lower and raise your voice depending on what it is that you're saying. And then the next tip, and the most important of them all, is that try and use the correct tense and grammar when you're giving your answers. You must have good subject-verb agreement. To be quite honest, even if you use a variety of sentence structures, if you use good vocabulary, if you use linking words, if you use intonation, if your grammar is not correct, then automatically you get a low band. So please try as much as possible to speak in the correct tense and in the correct grammar. Make sure you're using your prepositions correctly, okay? I derive pleasure from the preposition from, okay? Ensure that you use your prepositions correctly. Watching the film with the preposition with, okay? Now, if you're going to be sitting for your IELTS speaking test in the next few days, then you will find this section very helpful, because I'm now going to read the questions, and then as I read the questions, please think of an answer. Are you ready? Question 1. Do you like to watch films? Question 2. Do you prefer local or foreign films? Question 3. What genre of films is your favorite? Question 4. How often do you go to the cinema to watch a movie? Question 5. What was the first film that you watched? Now, I hope you had no problems answering those questions, but if you had a few problems, do not worry because you still have the sample answers, and I'm now going to read for you the sample answers so that you can practice pronouncing them as I do. Question 1. Do you like to watch films? Yes, I must say that I derive a lot of pleasure from watching films. I find them really entertaining, even more so when I watch them with my family or friends. Question 2. Do you prefer local or foreign films? I like a mixture of both, depending on my mood and who I'm watching the film with. When I'm alone or with my friends, we tend to watch foreign films, mainly in English, but if I'm watching a film with my family, we often opt for local films based on our culture. Question 3. What genre of films is your favorite? My favorite genre has to be comedy films because I can laugh my head off. I find horror films too scary and, in my opinion, sci-fi movies too fictitious and dull. Question 4. How often do you go to the cinema to watch a movie? Quite frankly, I rarely go to the movies. I prefer to watch films on TV or from a DVD. It is much cheaper, convenient to watch at home, and equally entertaining. Question 5. What was the first film that you watched? If my memory serves me right, it was Titanic, a film about the 1912 sinking of the RMS Titanic, starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. So there you go. If you found this lesson helpful, then please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share this video on all your social media platforms. Have you subscribed? Go on, click that subscribe button, click that thumbs up button, and share this video on all your social media platforms because sharing is caring. Now, thank you very much and see you in our next lesson. Bye bye.